My name is Michael Davis. I'm 68 years old. I'm a retired civil engineer from Nashville, Tennessee. And 5 years ago, I was standing in my own backyard, right out there, breathing so hard I thought I was going to die. It wasn't a heart attack, not technically. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October. My daughter had brought my grandson Leo over for the weekend. Leo was 4 years old at the time, full of energy, full of laughter, absolutely fearless the way only 4-year-olds can be. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Grandpa, chase me." 2 words, that's all it took. I took maybe 6 steps across that grass before my legs turned to concrete. My chest tightened, my vision blurred at the edges. I had to stop, bend over, put my hands on my knees, and just breathe. Leo stopped running. He turned around. He looked at me with a face I will never forget for as long as I live. It wasn't frustration, it wasn't impatience, it was confusion. He didn't understand why Grandpa couldn't run. He was 4 years old and he was waiting for me, and I had nothing to give him. I told him I was tired. He nodded and went to play alone. I went inside and sat down in my leather chair in the home office. I didn't move for a long time. Now, I spent 35 years as a civil engineer. I built bridges, real ones, steel and concrete over rivers and valleys. And here's what every engineer knows before anything else. If the foundation is cracked, it doesn't matter how beautiful the structure on top looks. You can paint it, you can decorate it, you can put up all the lights you want. If the foundation fails, everything falls. That afternoon, sitting in that chair, I realized my foundation was cracked, and it had been cracking for years. 3 weeks later, my doctor confirmed what I already suspected: type 2 diabetes, severe hypertension, blood pressure at 158/96, body fat through the roof. He looked at me across his desk and he didn't sugarcoat it. He said, "Michael, the way things are going right now, you are looking at a stroke or a cardiac event within the next 2 to 3 years, possibly sooner." I was 63 years old. My wife had passed 4 years before that. And after I lost her, I did what a lot of men do when they don't know how to grieve. I buried myself in work. I stopped cooking real meals. I stopped walking. I stopped paying attention. I told myself I was fine. Engineers are problem solvers, but we are also historically terrible at admitting when the problem is us. So there I was, 63 years old, alone in Nashville, sedentary, obese, joints that creaked like an old wooden floor, a grandson I couldn't chase across a backyard, and a doctor telling me I was running out of time. Most people, when they hear a story like this, they assume what comes next is the gym, the trainer, the protein shakes, the 5 a.m. workouts, the dramatic transformation montage. That is not what happened. Because here's the thing, I tried that. I hired a trainer for 6 weeks. I lasted 4. My knees couldn't handle the impact. My schedule couldn't handle the time commitment. My ego couldn't handle being the heaviest, slowest, most broken down person in a room full of mirrors and 25-year-olds lifting twice their body weight. I quit, and I felt worse than when I started. So I went back to what I know: engineering, systems thinking. When a structure is failing, you don't throw everything at it at once. You identify the critical load-bearing elements. You calculate the minimum intervention necessary to stabilize the system. You work with precision, not panic. I called it the minimum effective dose. The question I started asking wasn't, "How much can I do?" It was, "What is the smallest, most targeted change that produces the maximum result?" I started reading, I started researching, and slowly what became clear to me, what the data kept pointing back to, was not exercise. Not at first. It was food. Specifically, it was what I was eating in the morning. And even more specifically, it was one ingredient that I started putting into my breakfast every single day that changed more about my body than anything else I have ever done. I'm going to tell you exactly what that ingredient is. But I want you to understand the full picture first, because the ingredient doesn't work in isolation. It works as part of a system. And the system, once I understood it, is almost embarrassingly simple. Let me talk like an engineer for a moment, because this is how I actually processed all of this. When I started researching muscle loss in men over 60, I kept running into the same core problem. It's called sarcopenia. It's the gradual, progressive loss of skeletal muscle mass that begins in your 40s and accelerates after 60. By the time most men hit their late 60s, they've lost somewhere between 15 and 30% of the muscle they had in their prime. And the majority of them have no idea it's happening. They just think they're getting old. They think the weakness is inevitable. They think the tiredness is just part of the deal. It is not inevitable. That's the first thing I had to unlearn. The second thing I had to unlearn was that muscle requires a gym. It doesn't. What muscle requires is three things: adequate protein, specifically the right amino acids delivered at the right time, reduced inflammation, and stable blood sugar. That's it. That's the foundation. If you get those three things right, your body has everything it needs to begin rebuilding, even at 63, even at 68, even at 70. So I built my morning around those three principles. The first food I introduced was sardines. I know, I can already hear the reaction, but hear me out. Small, oily, canned sardines became a non-negotiable part of my breakfast within the first month. Here's why. Sardines are loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, which directly reduce systemic inflammation, the kind of chronic, low-grade inflammation that is quietly destroying your muscle tissue every single day after 60. They also contain vitamin D and calcium for bone density. They have CoQ10 for mitochondrial energy, meaning energy at the cellular level, not just the surface level. And unlike larger fish, their mercury content is low enough that you can eat them 3 or 4 times a week without any concern. I started having a small tin, sometimes with a boiled egg, sometimes on top of brown rice. Just a few pieces, nothing elaborate. The second thing I added was seaweed, not the kind in a sushi restaurant necessarily. I mean dried seaweed, which I would add to soups or just rehydrate in warm water and eat on the side. Seaweed is one of those foods that sounds exotic until you understand what it actually does. It's rich in magnesium, potassium, and iodine, all essential for muscle contraction and metabolic function. The iodine specifically supports thyroid health, and your thyroid is your metabolism's engine. If that engine is running sluggish, and in most sedentary older adults it is, you will struggle to preserve lean muscle no matter what else you do. Seaweed also feeds beneficial gut bacteria, and this matters more than most people realize. Because here's something I didn't know before I started this process. You can eat the best food in the world, and your body will still not benefit from it fully if your digestion is compromised. Gut health is the delivery system for everything else. You fix the gut, you fix the absorption, and suddenly all the other nutrients you're consuming actually start working. The third addition was sesame seeds, ground sesame specifically, which I would mix into warm porridge or sprinkle over rice or vegetables. These are tiny, but the nutrient density is extraordinary. Calcium, magnesium, healthy fats, plant-based protein, and a compound called sesamin that supports liver function and hormone balance. And for men in their 60s and 70s, hormone balance is not a minor issue. Declining testosterone, rising cortisol, dysregulated leptin, these are all real and measurable contributors to accelerated muscle loss. Ground sesame, eaten consistently, helps address that at a foundational level. Not dramatically, not overnight, but consistently. And consistency is the only currency that matters in engineering. Fourth, sweet potatoes. Purple sweet potatoes specifically, the Okinawan variety, though regular ones work too. I would steam them, sometimes roast them, occasionally just eat them cold as a midday snack with a little sea salt. Sweet potatoes are complex carbohydrates, which means they release energy slowly, keeping blood sugar stable rather than spiking it. This is critical for a man who had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The resistant starch in sweet potatoes also feeds gut bacteria, creating a positive feedback loop for digestion, immunity, and muscle recovery. And they contain beta-carotene and anthocyanins, powerful anti-inflammatory compounds that protect the cells that create energy, not just the energy itself. I had spent years being told to cut carbs, and yes, refined carbs, white bread, sugar, processed food, those needed to go. But complex carbohydrates like sweet potatoes, those aren't the enemy, those are fuel. Muscles don't grow in a caloric deficit, they grow in balance. And then there was the fifth one, the main one, the one I want to spend real time on, natto. I had never heard of natto before I started this research. And when I first looked it up and saw what it was, fermented soybeans, sticky and stringy, and with an aroma that is, let's say, assertive, I almost dismissed it immediately. But the data kept pointing back to it, study after study, centenarian diet after centenarian diet in Japan. I kept seeing natto, so I ordered some. I tried it, and I will be honest with you, the first time I put it down after 2 bites. The texture is unlike anything in the American diet. It pulls apart in long, gluey strands. The smell is strong and fermented. It is genuinely an acquired taste. But I went back to it, because I'm an engineer, and I don't abandon a load-bearing material because it's inconvenient. Here's what natto contains that nothing else on this list quite replicates. It has a complete amino acid profile. All 9 essential amino acids in a single plant-based food. For a senior whose digestive system struggles with heavy proteins like red meat, that is significant. It's also packed with nattokinase, a unique enzyme that supports circulation, and circulation is what delivers nutrients to muscle cells in the first place. Without adequate blood flow, all those amino acids and vitamins and minerals are just floating around looking for a door that won't open. Natto also contains vitamin K2, which helps direct calcium to bones rather than arteries. And for men on blood pressure medication, as I was, that distinction is not trivial. And it's fermented, which means it's loaded with probiotics that directly repair and reinforce the gut lining. Better gut, better absorption, better delivery of everything else you're eating. I started adding natto to my breakfast every morning. Just one small serving, about 45 grams, which is the standard pack size, mixed with a little soy sauce and Japanese mustard, which cuts the smell significantly. Sometimes over brown rice, sometimes next to a piece of grilled fish. Within 6 weeks of consistent daily natto consumption, combined with the other 4 foods, the short movement sessions I'll mention in a moment, and proper sleep, my energy levels had shifted noticeably. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the way a structure stabilizes after you reinforce the foundation. Gradually, solidly, undeniably. I want to give you numbers, because I am an engineer and I believe in data, and I think vague testimonials do more harm than good. At 63, my blood pressure was 158/96. Today, at 68, it sits consistently at 120/80. My doctor calls that textbook perfect. My fasting blood sugar, which had me on the edge of full type 2 diabetes 5 years ago, is now in the normal range. I reversed the trend, not with medication, though I used what was prescribed when I needed it, but by addressing the root cause rather than managing the symptom. My physician ran a full panel last spring, including a cardiovascular fitness assessment and muscle strength evaluation, and his exact words were, "Michael, based on these numbers, your physiological age is closer to 52 than 68. You are in the top 5% of cardiovascular and muscular health for men your age." I'm going to let that sit there for a moment. Top 5% at 68. As someone who couldn't chase a 4-year-old across a backyard 5 years ago. Leo is 9 now. Last summer he came over and we ran around that backyard for 45 minutes. I chased him. I caught him. I picked him up and tossed him in the grass and he laughed so hard he cried. That moment, that single afternoon in the backyard, is worth more to me than any lab result. That is what this was always about. Now, I want to be clear about something because the title of this video says, "Without exercise." And I want to explain what I mean by that and what I don't mean. I do not go to a gym. I do not have a trainer. I do not do 2-hour workout sessions. I have never, not once in the last 5 years, signed up for a fitness class or bought an expensive piece of equipment. The total cost of my physical routine is $0. What I do is this: 10 minutes of movement, 3 times a week, using only my body weight and the furniture in my home office. That's it. Chair squats, countertop push-ups, slow standing rows using a resistance band I bought for $6. Core work on the floor. I design these sessions the same way I would design a structural repair. Identify the minimum load required to stimulate adaptation. Apply it with precision. Allow adequate recovery time. 10 minutes, 3 times a week. Done. The reason this works, the reason the muscle responds even to such a small stimulus, is because the food is doing the heavy lifting first. If your cells are inflamed, your blood sugar is unstable, and your protein delivery system is compromised, you can work out for 2 hours every day and your body will still struggle to build and maintain lean tissue. But if you have reduced inflammation through omega-3s, stabilized blood sugar through complex carbohydrates and fermented foods, repaired your gut through probiotics, and given your cells a complete amino acid source every single morning, then even a short targeted movement session is enough to trigger genuine adaptation. The system is primed, the signal gets through. That's the minimum effective dose principle. Not minimum effort, minimum necessary intervention to produce maximum result. It's the same calculation I made for every bridge I ever built. Let me also tell you what I stopped doing, because I think this matters as much as what I started. I stopped eating processed food almost entirely. Not because I followed some strict diet, I hate rigid rules, but because once I started eating foods with real nutritional density, processed food started tasting like cardboard, and I lost interest in it naturally. I stopped skipping breakfast. For years I'd drink black coffee and call it a morning. Now I sit down every morning, I eat a real meal, and I eat it slowly and deliberately. That ritual, the act of sitting down, breathing, chewing intentionally, is not just psychological. It has a measurable effect on cortisol levels, on digestion, on how efficiently your body processes what you're giving it. I also stopped obsessing over calories. Muscle doesn't grow in a deficit. I eat enough. I eat the right things. And I trust the system. If you're listening to this, and you're somewhere near where I was 5 years ago, tired, heavy, stiff, watching your grandchildren from a chair instead of running with them, I want you to hear this directly. It is not too late. The body at 63, 68, 70, it still responds. The signals still get through. The architecture can still be reinforced. Start with one thing. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. Change your breakfast. Add one of these 5 foods to your morning meal this week. Maybe it's a spoonful of ground sesame over your oatmeal. Maybe it's a small tin of sardines alongside a boiled egg. Maybe you're adventurous and you order a pack of natto and you give it 2 honest tries with some soy sauce. Pick one. Do it with intention. Sit down. Eat slowly. Let that be your first signal to your body. We are building now. You don't need a gym. You don't need a trainer. You don't need a cabinet full of supplements that cost you $200 a month. You need the right food at the right time, eaten with consistency and intention. That is the foundation. Get the foundation right, and everything else becomes possible. I'm Michael Davis. I'm 68 years old. I'm in the best shape of my adult life. And the last time Leo came to visit, he couldn't outrun me. That's the whole story.